Welcome to the Emerging Civil War podcast. I'm Chris Mackowski. Thanks for joining us. And coming to me from the depths of the wilderness is my good friend Tom Van Winkle. Tom, how are you?
Doing great, Chris. How are you?
Doing real well. Tom is here in his capacity as president of the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'll mention that I'm the vice president of Cvbt. But Tom, tell us, what is Cvbt?
Cvbt, Central Virginia Battlefield Trust. We were formed back in 1996, 25 years ago. And the way that happened was the National Park Service, who has one of the largest military parks in the country here, as everybody knows, had some boundaries on what they could and could not buy. They could not purchase land that was outside of their approved boundaries. And they also could not purchase battlefield land that was being sold for over the assessed value. And a lot of these battlefields were getting lost because of it. So a group of some local leaders, civilians, got together and said, we need to come up with some way in which we can help the Park Service and we can handle this. So we created the Central Vineyard Battlefield Trust, basically to handle those two areas where the Park Service couldn't. And of course, from there, with the uncontrolled progress, I guess you want to call it, in the area, it has grown exponentially from that original mission statement. So here we are.
Yeah. Now, I want to back up to something you said about, the Park Service is not allowed to buy property above its assessed value. But then tying back to what you said about the development in this area, appraised value of properties is often a lot higher than assessed values. Can you talk just a little bit about that the relationship between those numbers, or the disconnect between those two numbers, and how that impacts the ability to purchase land?
Yeah, even now today, the fair market value and the real estate environment that we're in even plays a bigger role in it, because now there's bidding wars over properties. So you get an assessed value of the property, a tax assessed value. And that, again, that's what the park is allowed to purchase. But no seller really is ever going to sell their property for an assessed value. They want as much as they can, either appraised value or higher than. So what Cbbt did was we would come in and we would purchase the property at the fair market value, or the agreed value that we could get with the seller, which would be over the assessed value. And then we would resell it to the Park Service at what they were able to pay, and we would absorb the difference. Sometimes properties would be lost for the want of $20,000, and it just didn't make sense for that to happen. So those numbers sometimes were very close. They weren't that far apart, but the park just couldn't go another dollar more. So that's how we started out doing it. And from there, it just grew to actually us just purchasing properties outright.
And often, what happens to those properties after Cvbt buys them?
Well, we're a land trust. We don't really want to own the properties forever. So what we've tried doing is to get them back into the park system by means of which I just said, trying to sell them back for a price they can pay, or we'll try to get an easement on it, or we'll try to get into the county records. We really don't want to own them forever because we do pay taxes on them. But there are properties that we have, and we more than likely will own in perpetuity because they're probably never going to get into the boundaries of the park. If the park wants a property outside the boundaries, they have to go to Congress and get a federally approved boundary adjustment. There's a minor boundary adjustment, which happens sometimes. And there's a major boundary adjustment that I have not seen in the 27 years that I've been doing this. So in many times we will have a battlefield that we felt needed to be saved. We know we're gonna own it forever. But for the most part, we try to get them into the national inventory, or at least the county inventory.
Now, for folks who aren't plugged in, you talked about the park here, Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania National Military Park, that actually includes 4 major battlefields, some of the most famous, iconic battles of the war. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, right here in Fredericksburg, we are dead center between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia. Right now, those are two of the highest commerce areas everybody travels to and from. But in the 1862 area, that was dead center between the two capitals, the capital of the Confederacy being in Richmond and Washington, D.C., obviously being for the Union. So in the early part of the Civil War, the war was, I call it capture the flag, was kind of the main reason for the warring factors to be here. Everybody was trying to get to Washington, everybody was trying to get to Richmond. We were in the middle. So you had, the Battle of Fredericksburg in 62, Chancellorsville in 63, and you had Wilderness and Spotsylvania Courthouse in 64, all over the same territory, the same grounds, overlapping in many cases. When I do tours here, I know you do too. Some people want to go, give me the whole tour in half a day of everything that happened here. Wait a minute, weren't we just here talking about Chancellorsville? Why are we back here talking about the Wilderness? Because they overlap. It gets confusing sometimes. But this was just a hotbed of the Civil War. Everybody fought here at the midpoint between the two capitals. So there we have 100,000 or so casualties. In aggregate, over 700,000 troops fought here. Fredericksburg was shell decimated. It was the first city in the United States that American troops held, an American city. It's just a lot of firsts here and a lot of decimation here. In fact, in about 1862 or so, there were somewhere around 15,000 inhabitants in this region. After the war, it took until the 1940s for that number to repopulate here. That's just how decimated this area was. So, it's no wonder that these four battlefields are on everybody's tip of everybody's tongue. You say the name of them, they know them.
And the context for a lot of these battles is incredible too. With Fredericksburg, you have the Emancipation Proclamation about to get finalized. With Chancellorsville, you have the death of Stonewall Jackson, a very iconic figure in the story of the war. With the Wilderness, you've got, of course, the fires, which made it particularly creepy, although there were fires elsewhere. But you also have the first matchup between Lee and Grant, and then on to Spotsylvania, where you've got the Bloody Angle and 2 weeks of intense fighting. So, lots of great context for these very iconic battles as well. And they're all like Gettysburg-sized battlefields. The Battle of Fredericksburg, by sheer number of people involved, was actually bigger than Gettysburg. So that's a lot of acreage to try to keep track of, Tom.
It is. It's quite a bit of acreage. And like I say, a lot of things happen here. Being that you said in the opening here, I do live on the Wilderness battlefield, right on what was Wilderness Run. And of course, that's my most prominent battlefield because I can walk out my back door and I'm in it and I can walk it. When I do a tour, I always seem to upset my Gettysburg fans when I put them on the four-way stop between Brock Road and Orange Plank Road and explain to them this is where the Civil War changed. This was the major turning point in the Civil War. No, it was Gettysburg. Well, no, from that point on, it was always fight, go back across the river, wait for the weather to get better, fight, and do it all over again. And that Wilderness battle, everything changed. The war changed. We weren't looking for to capture the flag anymore. We were going after Lee's army, and they were just going to follow him until it was done. And of course, that's what happened. So, as you say, there's a lot of things happen here that change the tide of a lot of different things. A lot of things, if you play What If, which is probably a dangerous thing to do in what we do, but you could play a lot of what ifs, and things could have changed dramatically here, just in these four battles.
And I'll always slip in kind of the forgotten campaign here, Mine Run in November of 1863. A lot of people skip from Gettysburg to the Wilderness as though nothing happened in those intervening months. But the armies through the fall of 63 are in constant combat. And so they come back through the Wilderness again as part of the Mine Run campaign. And there's a huge battle that almost takes place, but not quite.
It was known as the battle that never happened. That's back when Meade was bragging in a letter to Lincoln about how he had chased Lee out of their territory. And Lincoln famously replied, "Well, it's all our territory. Do something." And, it really was a prelude to the Battle of the Wilderness, because if you look at it at the way the Union had set it up, they basically did the same thing for the Battle of the Wilderness when they crossed the river and everything. So it was another little area that nobody really pays attention to, but it meant something. It was a battle that, Payne's Farm was basically the only thing that really happened out there, but it was overall set up the Battle of the Wilderness. And of course, Lee was watching what was going on and had a pretty good idea what was going to happen the next campaign anyway.
Yeah. So much history in this area, and CVBT is the local boots on the ground to really make sure that someone's looking after battlefield preservation opportunities. How does CVBT work with the American Battlefield Trust, which many of our viewers and listeners are proud members of?
Well, as everybody knows, American Battlefield Trust is a national organization. They are the 50-pound gorilla in the room. They are the biggest organization, but we are basically Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Wilderness, Spotsylvania Courthouse. We have a tie to the community. We have, as you say, boots on the ground. We have people here, family members on our board that have family members that have been here all along. Everybody knows somebody. But when it comes to the American Battlefield Trust, some people go, well, aren't you guys butting heads? I said, no, absolutely not. We're just the opposite. There may be things here that we have that, again, we're a small organization. We're 600 members. We have very small staff. Everything we do is by donation. We have no government funding or anything like that. Never did. Most likely never will. So when we have a large tract of land, say something that's in the millions of dollars, we'll call the trust up and say, hey, are you interested in this? Let's partner on it. The trust, in fact, lately the trust has called us up. They had the one piece of property over in the wilderness. They had a remaining portion of the balance left, and they asked if we could help, and we did. We raised the money for that. So a very symbiont relationship. We help each other. We do not butt heads. And President Duncan on the trust and myself are both of the opinion that if you don't care who gets the credit, anything can be done, and that's what we do. The purpose in both our organizations is to preserve our historical ground. However we can get to that end, that's what we do. So no, we are absolutely 100% partners both ways.
So one of the key milestones in CVBT's history is actually a partnership with the trust back when they were the Civil War Trust, or the Civil War Preservation Trust, I think that far back, with the slaughter pen battlefield at Fredericksburg. Can you talk a little bit about that story, which was so important?
Yeah, that was, if anybody knows the historian and Park Service historian Frank O'Reilly, he always says that is where the battle was won and lost. Most people come out to Fredericksburg, they go to the stone wall and figure they've seen the battle, but they really haven't. So that was a piece of property, 206 acres, I believe it was, that Cbbt had its eyes on very early and had talked to the owners at quite some time. And we were way back then talking in the $3 million range, which again, for us was an exceptional amount of money early on, but still is today, it's money. Things didn't quite work out, and then time went on, and then a realtor got involved, and then American Battlefield Trust, Civil War Trust back then got involved, and a deal was made for $12 million. Still the most ever paid for a piece of battlefield land to date anywhere. So the trust board was trying to figure out how can they pay for such a huge purchase price. It never had been done before. And basically they were probably not going to do it because of the financial reasons. Our then president, our esteemed Dr. Mike Stevens, our president then, who everybody calls the preacher, the evangelist, made a statement to the trust, says, we'll kick in $1 million. If we kick in $1 million, will you purchase this? This needs to be purchased. And they agreed to. And then we all looked at Dr. Stevens and said, okay, where are we going to get $1 million? But that is part of the story of the Central Virginia Battlefield Trust. I always look at us like Edison. If everybody knows Edison, he would brag that he's going to create something, then run back to his lab and figure out how he's going to put it together. That's essentially what we did. We said, okay, we'll get you $1 million, but we did. It took several years. We got the full amount, $1 million to the trust, and Slaughter Pen was saved. So we tend to do things sometimes that don't make a lot of sense on paper, but we always seem to figure it out.
So let's take a couple of steps back in time from there, because although the slaughter pen, certainly a banner project, it was not the first project that you guys did, or that we guys did in Fredericksburg. Where was the first success in Fredericksburg?
The first success was back in 1977, just barely after we got 501c3 status. When we were created in 96, but it wasn't until May of 97 that we got 501c3 status where we could accept, tax deductible funds. And if everybody's familiar with the stone wall in Fredericksburg, there's a ridge behind the stone wall that was held by Montfort Academy back then. And they were going to sell the ridge and make it a parking lot. Well, that ridge, as you know, had Confederate artillery on 2 occasions that actually supported Confederate artillery, which supported the Confederate riflemen down the sunken road. So the Civil War Trust, which I think back then was still the Association for the Preservation of Civil War Sites, if I get all those letters together, said, well, we need to save this. Well, the asking price of it was $1.65 million. Again, above what the National Park Service could pay. It was above the assessed value. So anyway, Central Virginia Battlefields Trust scraped together some cash and kicked in with the APCWS, and it was purchased. And then it was sold back to the park for about $120,000 less, because that's only what they could afford to. This goes back to what they can and can't pay. So everybody took a $120,000 hit, so to speak, on it, but that's what we're here for. So that was 1977. It was just after we formed. That was our first success.
And it's kind of neat because when the Park Service does, chip in and pay for what it can, that's money that still goes back into the kitties for future preservation opportunities.
Exactly. It's all recycled and used again.
So 4 major battlefields in the area. There's the first victory at Fredericksburg. Let's roll through the other 3 battlefields. We'll do them in chronological order and head out to Chancellorsville. What was the first big win out there?
Oh, you got to make me do that, huh? Chancellorsville, the first one was probably, well, let me first say, I've gone on the record. I said something years ago that I probably shouldn't have, but it's working out. I told somebody who repeated it in the press that I would like to be able to walk a large portion of the Jackson flank attack uninterrupted. In other words, continuous properties. Since then, we've actually been trying to do that. So I think the first one we did was back in 1998. We did the Jackson flank attack on Route 3, Plank Road. It was 2 lots. We purchased it, and that got turned over to the Park Service. So that if you go there now, that's a National Park Service site. So 98, I think, was the first one we did there. And we've done a dozen since that. I don't know if most people might have gone down Route 3. Remember this giant castle out there on Route 3. It was a military arms / something else type of a thing. We purchased that and tore that down. So we've been working out in Chancellorsville for years. So we've got 12 parcels that have been saved out there, and I'll just say more to come on that very soon.
Yeah, and to me, that's one of the fascinating things about battlefield preservation is because you really do have to take a very long-term look. It's a long game, and once upon a time, people probably thought you were nuts to say that you could walk a big portion of the flank attack, and now look, 25 years later, you really can. But it requires patience, it requires perseverance, it requires relationship building, and as you say, that big vision.
It's really a chess game. I'll take you from Chancellorsville, go back to Fredericksburg real quick. Pelham's Corner. Everybody knows Pelham's Corner. It was John Pelham and his guns held the Union back several hours, so a lot of different things could happen. But we were after Pelham's Corner for quite a while, but a local developer owned it. But there were 2 adjacent lots that actually didn't mean anything as far as battlefield went. But our then president, Enos Richardson, had thought ahead and said, you know what? These 2 lots are for sale. They don't mean anything, but let's buy them. They're next to Pelham's Corner, what we want. He had the foresight to purchase these 2 lots. Years later, the developer that owned the corner, Pelham's Corner, the 1 acre we wanted to put in a couple of retail stores there. But the requirements from the county is, well, you need to have a leach field or whatever it was. And in those 2 lots that Central Virginia Battlefield Trust happens to own are the ones you need. So we made a deal. We traded. We wound up with Pelham's Corner for those 2 lots that were deemed useless to us. So it is a chess game. You do have to look far forward in this business to make sure you can get what you want. You may not get it right away. It may be years before you get it, but you have to think way forward.
And it seems to me that your ability to just try to make something happen and be flexible and work with lots of different partners. And I think of McClaw's Wedge as a great example of that, where lots of different sorts of players were involved in preserving those 100+ acres there.
Yeah, and that was it was about 99 acres. And what happened with that is, again, count Enos Richardson. We didn't have the money to do that. So Enos said, well, I'll buy it and you can buy it from me. So, it's nice to have board members with that kind of, they're that well-heeled, let's put it that way. I'm not one of them. But so, yeah, and one of the other things that happens lots of times with these pieces of property is you're not dealing with one single seller. It may be 2 or 3 siblings that inherited it. Well, if you get more than 2 people together, the chance of getting 100% agreement between the 2 of them, never mind 3 or 4 of them, is very rare. Because sometimes you have to wait years for everybody on the seller side to come together with what they want to do. 2 or 3 of them might say, well, I really want a lot of money. And the other one says, well, our parents would not want it developed. So then you have to let that play out. You don't want to pressure them. At Cvbt, we have what we call win-win mentality. We work with everybody. We don't fight with anybody unless they require it. Only once, but everybody was involved in that one. So yeah, you have a lot of different things that can happen. I mean, a lot of people don't know that Slaughter Pen Farm almost didn't happen because of cats, the furry kind of cats. The owner's wife had a large amount of barn cats she cared quite a bit for. And until she got a satisfactory answer of where those cats were going to go, she wasn't going to sign anything. So, things behind the scenes with purchasing properties.
Yeah. So let's hop out to the wilderness. And what do you recall as the first big win out of the wilderness?
Wilderness was probably Grant's Knoll. And that was a donation from a developer. And it was the corner. Well, it's said where Grant's Knoll was, where Grant and Meade had their headquarters, one of the Battle of the Wilderness, just adjacent to the Lacey House, or Elwood, which is more commonly known today. They gave us that property, which was great. We much appreciated it. And once we walked the property, we realized that it was more of had a lot of challenges to clean up. Let's put it that way. And then they gave us another piece of it, which was adjacent to it, which again had some challenges to clean up. But it was the first major area that we really were able to grab onto there. And then later on down the road, there's a tract of land, a farm called the Lions Farm, which is a huge piece of property that is directly adjacent to Elwood, on the corner of what we call the gateway to the wilderness, Route 20, Orange Plank Road and Plank Road. We were able to get a large amount of acreage there and also sell off some to the park, because part of it was in their boundary, part of it wasn't. So we were able to get a large piece there. And that goes back to the days that people remember the Walmart dispute. A coalition was put together to try to get Walmart to move down the road, which they eventually did a couple miles, and they're doing just fine, by the way, if you're worried about it.
Yeah, if anybody's worried about Walmart, they're doing okay.
They're just doing fine. But we weren't part of the coalition. We decided, all right, we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and we bought the corner. I said, okay, well, if this is what you're going to do, you're not getting anything over here because we're going to buy that. So again, the chess game, and there's still pieces there that are being purchased. More on that in a couple of, maybe in 2 months or so. Also, and maybe some more information on the wilderness coming up. I hate doing that, by the way. I hate saying that. And everybody always comes to me and says, you say over and over again, and you write over and over again, you're working on something, you're working on something. Why don't you tell us? Can't do that until it's signed on the dotted line, because a lot of the times we work on something for a year or two and it falls through. It's not fair to us, to you, or to the sellers to announce something that hasn't happened yet. So we're always going to err on the side of caution. So yes, I'm going to say over and over again, there's more coming until I sign it.
Yeah, it is. It's funny how long some of these negotiations take, because it really requires lots of details, lots of relationship building, lots of patience.
Patience is a great word, and that's hard. After a couple of years, patience starts to get a little thin sometimes on both sides, but you have to do that. Again, it's the long game. We're not out to pressure anybody. We have things where I will say one thing we're working on. I'll tell you what we're working on. We've been working on the third and last river crossing from the Battle of Fredericksburg called Franklin's Crossing. It is the only one that is not technically protected yet. It's owned by the county. We are now close to 2.5 years working with the county to try to protect this tract of land in one way or another. The key term is here is we are still working. To give you any idea how long some things take. So it'll happen one way or another, but Lord knows how long it's going to take.
Yeah. And I remember when those negotiations started, and it was like, yeah, we're all in, we're ready to make this happen.
Yeah.
And it was like this sense of imminence when those discussions started, and then 2.5 years later.
Exactly. I mean, I've said to you many times, I always hearken Cbbt as the picture of a duck going across the calm pond, just cruising along, but underneath, the feet are going crazy. We're those feet that are going crazy all the time. So it's not as smooth as it always looked.
So down in Spotsy, the first piece of property that Cbbt protected down there.
Spotsylvania. Well, there's one property. I'm looking at my list here because I have so many of these things. I'm trying to get the chronological order right. I think Harris Farm was the first one we protected, but that was a piece of property that the APCWS had protected, and that was back with the 6th Army Corps. You know better than the 13th, I think. Was that the 13th? I'm trying to think of the battle happened there. That was in Spotsy. There was what, the 13th or 14th?
The 19th at Harris Farm. 19th.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the 19th. Yeah.
Yeah. They turned that over to us, so we interpret it now. We have markers up there now, and that's literally in the middle of a subdivision, surrounded by very large estates. Luckily, we had one very nice person in one of the houses next to us that cut the lawn for us for quite a few years, so they moved. But what we did with that was we upgraded that. We have parking for a bus. You can go there and see the monument, and then everything else. That was one of the first ones. Then we went to the Po River. We had two tracks in the Po River. Then the latest ones we did 14 acres, the 5th Corps over on Brock Road. We just did that not too long ago. And the big one we just did, Myers Hill, which was 74 acres, just about 74 acres in Myers Hill, which was a great one because it's an intact battlefield. It's almost untouched. Has the remains of the original house there that Myers, the namesake of a hill, had. We have remnants of that. And to Spotsylvania, so much of it has not been paid much attention to, in our opinion. So when things come up in Spotsylvania that are vetted as, yeah, we should do this, we go after them. Brock Road, one of our board members, Robert Lee Hodge, who may be known to many people, was a reenactor supreme and other things, author, historian. He calls Brock Road one of the most historic roads in the country, and he's not wrong. A lot of things happen there, and a lot of these tracks are along that area. And when they pop up, we do our best to vet them and get them.
So speaking of Rob, I know that he's been very involved with getting the reenacting community to help support preservation efforts here and elsewhere. And again, just thinking about like different partners that Cvbt has worked with over the years in different capacities. That also, though, got Cvbt involved with the Battle of Franklin out in Tennessee, as I recall.
Yeah, Rob Hodge would probably be able to speak to you much better than that. It was before my time with the group, but yeah, Franklin folks invited him down, and however he managed to do it, he got them involved with a march or some sort of event that raised quite a bit of money for one of our purchases. So yeah, it's far-reaching. Our partners, reenactment groups, other friends groups, other land trust groups, anybody who who feels that they wants to help us this mission is not just us, it's anybody and everybody who can support and who believes in the mission of saving our history. I mean, especially nowadays when, it's becoming very difficult to try to explain why history should be saved, why you should understand it and be educated about it. It's, the way I look at it is, it's very hard to throw a rope around 70 acres of a battlefield and tow it off with your pickup truck. It's going to be there forever if we save that.
But it does seem that Civil War history, to people who don't know history, is a little radioactive these days because of controversies that have gone on in the news and people either passing flash judgments about the Civil War in general or making assumptions. But it's a crucial piece of American history for us to understand.
It is. I always say that the Revolutionary War created the country, the Civil War formed it. You can't just look at it on face value and look at blue and gray, this and that, black and white. If you study it, as you well know, it had a lot of background to it, of why things happened, what happened, when it happened, why it happened, what did the people really feel. These soldiers were no different than the soldiers nowadays. I mean, war is always a result of failed politics, and they didn't have much of a choice. They were more or less, if they were in the Army, they were forced to fight. If they weren't in the Army, they were peer pressured or by emotion wanted to join, or later on conscripted in it. It's not that everybody ran out there and said, hey, let's have a fight. It's a lot more to it. There's a lot more reasoning to it. And it's not just what general hid from behind which tree and which troop went up which hill. There's 800,000 plus stories to this, of individuals, human beings, families that never happened, families that lost loved ones, people that were lost in battle that were never found, never reinterred. I mean, Bud Hall, a great historian we both know, told me years ago, he says, you're standing on a Civil War battlefield, you're actually standing on a cemetery. So there is a lot to it, and it shouldn't be taken at face value, and it shouldn't be a fad, something we should do because everybody else is doing it. That's one of the main reasons we saved this property, so you can go on it and study it and understand it. Enlighten yourself, stand in the tracks. I mean, reading a book is great. I always say read the book and then stand where it happened. It changes your perspective of what's going on. So yeah, it's a flashpoint these days. It's caused some individuals, some corporations to back off of funding for these things. It's just it's a difficult time.
Making individual support all the more important. I'm going to ask you about the conference here in just a second, but since we're talking about ways that people can support the Cvbt, tell us a little about how can someone get involved?
Well, the first thing I say is become a member. Now, I say member because most people are used to that term. But when I took over here, I don't know how many years ago now, it seems like a lot, but it probably wasn't. That's what happens when you miss a meeting. I took the term member and I've kind of created the term to be more of a partner, because you're partnering. When you help us out, you're partnering in history. It's a continued history of that battlefield. I mean, if you're saving it, it's a continued history of that. So to become a partner or a partner member with us, I suggest everybody go on our website, cbbt.org, and make a donation and sign up. If you make a donation every year, you're a continued partner of ours, and we'll do separate appeals also for lands. But again, we are not government supported. All the money we get to keep our lights on to start with, and we have an extremely low overhead. We have 2 paid employees. I'll say that again, 2. That I can guarantee you is the lowest amount of employees of the battlefield groups out there by far, and I've looked into it. It's taken us 20 some odd years to come up where we needed 2 paid employees. But when you get into the amount of properties, we have a little over 35 properties purchased, more to be added on soon. You start having to deal with the taxes. You have to start dealing with the legal aspects. You can't do it by volunteerism anymore, and that's the only reason why we have 2 employees. The board is volunteer. I've been doing this 27 years and I haven't taken a nickel. It's cost me more to volunteer than it has anything else, but it's worthwhile. But go on the website, take a look at what we do. Everything's on there. Become a part of us. When we do, when we bring land appeals out, what we do when we purchase a piece of properties, the first two things we do is there's two funding sources that all battlefield groups basically rely on. That's the American Battlefield Protection Program, a federal grant program where you try to get, at least they will give you, if you qualify, half of the value of what you're purchasing, the purchase price. Then in Virginia, you have the Virginia Battlefield Preservation Partners or something like that. I get now too many acronyms here, but they will also allocate a certain amount of money. So when we do an appeal, we're doing an appeal for the being the margin left. Most of the time, the battlefields we purchase qualify for those. But if they don't, then we're looking at the full ticket of an entire battlefield, paying for the entire thing. And that's closing costs and everything else. And if anybody reads the Civil War news, I just did an article this month that once you purchase the battlefield, it's not over yet, because for some reason, every battlefield we seem to purchase has a house and several buildings on it. They have to be taken down to bring the battlefield back to its period look. That's not an inexpensive thing either. So yeah, we rely on personal private donations to keep our lights on, to bridge the gap between what we get from the government or what we don't get from the government. So it's very important. And we've relied, our foundation of being able to do this for 25 years have been our donors.
So 25 years, that's a lot to celebrate. And so a celebration is coming up next month. Tell us a little bit about what Cvbt is doing to commemorate 25 years of battlefield preservation.
Well, we decided, actually, we were supposed to do this in April, but as everybody knows, COVID has a way of changing everybody's plans. And we were going to go to a virtual celebration, but we felt that in 25 years, only happens every 25 years. I'm not going to be around for the next 25th. So we really
I hope you are, Tom. I hope you are.
Well, you probably won't like the way I look in 25 years. Not that I'm that anyway. Aside from that, so we decided to have it in October. We're going to have it in October 8th through 10th. It's going to be an outdoor, the main event is going to be outdoor open air under a tent on one of our Jackson flank attack properties. The reason we did this is when Cbp started, we didn't do anything our first year, but the second year we decided to start these conferences. And they were always outdoors on a battlefield we had purchased under a tent with the big catered barbecue, because that catered barbecue was always our little Civil War. Do you have Carolina style barbecue only? Do you have Virginia style? Now you have to have both. We learned that a long time ago. So there will be both styles of barbecue. We're going to have live music, fire pit. We're going to have all kinds of stuff on Saturday night, but starting the weekend off Friday night, we're going to have a complimentary presidential gathering at the Cvbt headquarters. You're going to have complimentary beer and wine, hors d'oeuvres, and it will be at the Cvbt office. It will have an outdoor section and an indoor section. So if you don't feel comfortable indoor, we can go outdoors under the tent, providing the weather is good. And we're trying to do all this as COVID prepared as possible. So you won't be relegated to indoors on Friday night. On Saturday, we're going to have two tours. We're going to have a tour of Salem Church, which we call the Forgotten or Lost Battlefield, pretty much the poster child of what not to do with preservation. And we're going to have Chris White from the American Battlefield Trust is going to have that tour. The tours are going to be drive yourself in your own vehicle. We're not going to stuff you into a bus with 50 of your best friends. We're going to have you safe in your own vehicles. So take solace in that. And then we're going to do a lunch in the afternoon at one of the local parks, a historical park, by the way, and that's in that area. And then later in the afternoon, we're going to do Willis Hill, which again, as we spoke from before, was our first save. And the expert of Fredericksburg, which is Frank O'Reilly from the National Park Service, is going to handle that for us. So we're going to have two tours on Saturday, and the dinner being on that battlefield will be Saturday night with a cocktail hour at 5, dinner at 6, and 7 o'clock we'll start the meeting. Don Fonz, who most people in the business know, wrote a letter years ago, who basically started this entire, I'll call it, industry of battlefield preservation. We're going to give him what's called the Happel Award, which is a very prestigious award that CBB gives out very rarely. He will be there, presented that award. We are going to have many historians there. I won't go down the name of the list because I invited them so they don't have to work, just sit, and we're going to thank them. But you're going to have a tremendous amount of very well-known historians to meet that have agreed to come and say a few nice things about Cvbt if I feed them. So
A smorgasbord of historians.
absolutely, that is exactly what it is. So, and then Sunday, or something we've done now for the past few years at a place you're well known, you know quite well, is Stevenson Ridge in Spotsylvania. We have a breakfast there, and it'll be, I believe it's going to be from 9 to 12. And we're going to have our keynote speaker this time at the breakfast, and that keynote speaker will be A. Wilson Green, a well-known historian. He was a director of the American Association for Preservation of Civil War Sites. I got it right that time. He was a director there at Pamplin Park. Very well-known person. He's going to speak about the preservation system or industry as we know it, and it would be a super speech by him to get to know exactly what's gone on through all the years to kind of fit in with our 25-year thing. So that's a very historic site, Stevenson Ridge on its own, which you well know. So it's going to be a 3-day event. We're going to do as much as we can outdoors, Stevenson Ridge being the only one indoors, but that's going to be set up so you won't be sitting next to everybody elbow to elbow. So we have really tried to do this in the environment that we have as safest way we can, but we still want to have it. It's just been too long. Nothing against Zoom, but after 100 or so Zoom meetings, it's time to try to do something a little different if we can, but safely. So that's what we're going to do.
I tell you, when we had the Emerging Civil War Symposium, it was a huge collective sigh of relief from people to just be able to be in person. And of course, it was ECW's 10th birthday. So 15 years to go to catch up with Cvbt. But, you know, the celebratory nature of the milestone, I think, is a real cool reason to get together.
Being a history organization, you should stop once in a while and take a look at your own history. You really should. And there's a lot of people to thank, your organization and our organization, to thank for getting to where both our organizations are today and for being able to do the things we do today. None of us have done it on our own. There's been just a list of people you could never stop reading that's helped us. And I tried to invite as many of them as I could to this particular event with the circumstances. But yeah, it's important, I think, sometimes to stop back. And then at the end of stopping back and looking at the history, make that commitment for what you're doing for the future. What's the next step? And we're going to have a few announcements that's going to launch our next steps also. So again,
So someone who's listening thinks that sounds like a really cool conference. How do I sign up?
Again, the ever popular website. You go on there to see our 2021 conference and you can sign up. It's a one price ticket for everything. Real clean and simple. I think you'd really enjoy it. And I think by now people are just dying to get outdoors and do something. So this is gonna, the amount of people that we're gonna have here at one time may not happen again. The group that we've assembled here to kind of thank is quite a group. Again, I'm not going to rely on their names to get people to come because I promised them, you know, usually when I call them up, it's like, all right, what do you want me to do now? No, not this time.
Yeah.
This time you're just going to come and have some fun. And of course they didn't believe me, but I found it.
So, well, the web address again, cvbt.org, and focusing on the 4 battlefields in the greater Fredericksburg area: Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Wilderness, and Spotsylvania. Tons of history, tons of stuff to explore, tons of ground to walk.
We did do one other battlefield though. I didn't add. Years ago.
Oh, that's true. That is.
Years ago, the American Battlefield Trust was trying to save a very large portion of Brandy Station, a very important portion, Fleetwood Hill. We did get a grant for $770,000 to help purchase Fleetwood Hill. So we did go out of the area a little bit, but again, it was very important. And again, cooperation between organizations. So just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, and of course it does tie into the story here as they're leaving Chancellorsville and all that too. So Tom Van Winkle, thanks so much for spending some time to chat with us tonight.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It was quite an honor.
Happy anniversary, my friend.
Thank you. Same to you.